Brody is our CBN News political analyst. And David, this is a mess. It isn't helping the president any. Is there any thought that he might try to pardon Paul Manafort?
Well, there's talk about that here in Washington, Pat, but at this point, a lot of folks, at least in this parlor game that we know of Washington, D.C., they're saying pretty much no, that wouldn't probably make much sense, at least at this point. But, you know, things change in Trump world, as we've known. Look, this is a bit of a mess, for sure, for the president. But in terms of the legal jeopardy question here, and that's what everybody is wondering about, you know, was it a crime? And really, there's some mixed views on that. I would say this, that from a legal perspective, what we're understanding is that what is the intent? In other words, would President Trump, and here's the legal question a lot of folks are wondering, and this is the question that would need to be answered, would President Trump have done this anyhow if there wasn't a campaign? Well, there's been a history of paying off a few people along the way. And so, therefore, if it's personal, if it was to protect the marriage, Melania, things that were going on there, that's different than campaign finance reform and actually having a targeted reason to do so. So that's going to be the other potential shoe that could drop. We'll have to wait and see. It feels like a drip, drip, drip scenario here, Pat.
You know, it all started with a so-called investigation of Russian meddling in our election. And Mueller has that's his mandate. He doesn't have a mandate to investigate personal financial wrongdoing or violation of IRS statutes. So what are you hearing up there about his overreach, and that's what it amounts to?
Well, that's right. That word overreach that you just said there, Pat, is the key word. That has been repeated at the White House. Folks that are close to President Trump talking to sources that are close to the president this morning saying the same thing, that this is not only overreach, but they talk about Michael Cohen specifically and how Michael Cohen has a credibility problem, they say. You know, we've heard Rudy Giuliani say this, but let's remember Michael Cohen had said at one point early on that Donald Trump knew nothing about any sort of payment, and now apparently he knew all about the payment and was directing it to go to, you know, from a campaign finance reform perspective, go into the campaign. So, look, they're going to point to his credibility, and that's going to be obviously a linchpin of all of this. As for Russian collusion, Pat, nothing on Manafort, nothing on Michael Cohen. The one concern clearly at the White House is what else does Michael Cohen potentially know? And I know they talk about a credibility problem with Cohen, but we hear now that Michael Cohen might have some information about this DNC hacking situation that took place. And did Trump know about it before it actually happened? Lanny Davis, Michael Cohen's attorney, suggesting that that could be the case. We'll have to wait and see.
How about this impeachment stuff? You know, it would almost be impossible to impeach a president, but the House may try it if it switches. What do you hear about that?
There's no doubt about it. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats won't talk about impeachment before the midterm elections, but they'll talk a lot about it after, for sure, if they win control of the House of Representatives. And that's, I don't want to say that's the plan, but that's kind of the blueprint, if you will, to go after this president. Look, they were going to go after him anyhow, but now with Michael Cohen's plea deal, that's the linchpin. That's the center of all of this. If you've got Michael Cohen saying that the president directly told Michael Cohen to make this payment, in essence breaking campaign finance laws. You can imagine what the Democrats are going to do with that. And remember, Pat, if the Democrats take control, and you know this, but if the Democrats take control, what happens? They have subpoena power. They're the ones in control, not Republicans, and that's not good news for President Trump.
Well, last thing, of course, the Republicans tried to impeach President Clinton, Bill Clinton, and they got an impeachment motion through the House, but it failed in the Senate. So I think, what are people saying? I mean, it really didn't go anywhere, and Clinton stayed in office.
Well, they don't have 67 votes anywhere near it in the Senate is what they'll need. They would need 2/3 in the Senate, as you know, Pat, and it's just not there. So once again, just back to 101, you can impeach a president in the House like what happened to Bill Clinton, but you have to convict him in the Senate, and you'd have to have 2/3, 67 votes. They don't have that. Now, having said that, the worst case scenario is what happened to, obviously, Richard Nixon at the time, where he basically lost the Republican Party, and they ditched him. And at that point, he was in all sorts of problems. And and he had to resign. Now, the question then becomes, how many Republicans will ditch President Trump if this thing gets worse? And that we just don't know right now.
David, thank you so much for that insight.